what does that real world use case look like? So we co-founded a living innovation laboratory here in the south of Switzerland. And the whole idea is to create a playground for researchers and innovators to come and do their stuff and not just write about it, but actually to learn by not by acting on it. That's the big idea.
Yeah, and I saw what is really also in context of new technology, very interesting. It's a 4-story, 5 apartments.
Right.
It's an integrated approach to sustainability and community engagement, which I find very exciting, and holistic living. So it's not only something where you just build something, but you have a direct connect, you can say, to humans. And the other beauty of it, we are both in Switzerland. So you're based in the beautiful Italian part, in
Mm-hmm.
the Ticino, in the Blenio Valley. And the focus, how I understand it, is that you want to reimagine construction technologies and also reimagine the relationship we as humans have with technology. Can you explain this a bit more, what the technology you're using is about? How do we connect better buildings and humans, and how do we almost have a morph, you can say, with the buildings, so that it's not separate, but we interact with buildings?
I think it starts from the belief that, or my belief this is that, we live 80% of our lives in buildings. I'm a firm believer actually buildings have an intelligence. They understand us just by the way we occupy and use space better than we actually understand ourselves. And I think it's interesting now with technology, with sensoring, with software, with real-time rendering, with all these different opportunities we have available to us, that I think it's a time to learn from buildings. We impose our thoughts on buildings on how they should be designed, how they should be sustainable, consume energy, water, and all the rest. And it's very much through our own eyes. And what we're curious in investigating is what happens if you flip the discourse? What happens if the building actually observes us and says, yes, you are designing correctly, but maybe you should look this or this and this and this. And these are the discussions we're sort of wanting to have around this relationship with your built environment, not just internally, but also externally. I think we've lost a bit of a connection with the biodiversity and this, everything that's outside of the four walls on the roof, should we say. And there's a lot of people that I've met in research and innovation that would like to go on this journey with us. And these are the things we're investigating together and collaborating to work on together to drive forward.
Beautiful. Can you give us a little bit of practical examples how you basically make the building talk to humans, which are not normally, as you say, we go into a building and that's it. We enjoy or we don't enjoy,
Right.
depending how nice the building is. But how can we make sure that this is almost what we said, it's almost the same, so it is fluent and is smooth, and we don't have this now here is the building, but it talks back to us, and it also gives us benefit for our mental health, which is
Right.
one of the most impactful factors right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have over 1 billion people who are have mental health issues recorded
Correct.
in the world, let alone the all unrecorded.
We are hitting it from a few points of views, but let me just highlight one or two. The first one is actually around the self-governance and self-ownership. If we're planning to put this building onto a blockchain, so its own decentralized autonomous community, whereby the building actually is a stakeholder in its own governance and maintenance. So not just is it there as a machine for people to live in, but at the same time, the users and the building are constantly in dialogue around the actual governance of the building. I think this is interesting to learn from buildings about issues like if we use the metaphor of a human being, if I get sunburned or I get a cut or I get injured or damaged, the building should communicate to this to you, because certain things we don't see until the damage has gone too far on. Degradation of building materials, we only notice it when it's actually gone past the return of maintenance. So that's
Yeah,
one aspect.
yeah.
The other one is around sort of the concepts of human building interface. And what we mean by this is actually the internal environment. How do we actually cooperate and collaborate as human beings when we're working together? Is this something we actually really do? Do we actually know how to do this? And with a building being a living innovation laboratory that is very heavily censored, we're in a position whereby we can actually view this. Now, the big third topic, which I'm sure everyone's thinking, is the big one is what is that human interaction and acceptance on a sort of societal level and on a legal level of this technology. So we're using this building as a sandbox to test these new concepts around legal frameworks and privacy frameworks at the same time. So that's just a broad idea of some of the things we're jumping into on this topic.
Yeah, you bring up, when we look at the third point you mentioned, obviously an incredible important point, which is the data and privacy issues we have around collecting all this data from human beings. And I remember scenes in science fiction, and that's the direction we are taking, which I think is positive in general. As you mentioned, you are sunburned, or you go out of the building and there's first a physical health check, and maybe even also mental. In which stage are you? How would you dress now? Maybe you have a cold, so you shouldn't go outside at all. You should lay down, you relax. There's always this balance to strike between super control and who has the data at the end, but also that I stay as a human being still in control. And I wonder how you manage this kind of control factor and the balance factor so that we don't end up in a George Orwell scenario, Big Brother is
Yes.
watching you everywhere. I think this is a big theme and the white elephant in the room. As
Correct.
excited as we obviously both are super excited about future tech, digital twins of humans and of buildings. So how do you deal with that when you
The first thing we said amongst ourselves is just be honest. Tell people what you're doing. If there is AI, blockchain, whatever it is, you have to be upfront about this. I think that's the clearest thing, honesty about the technology you're using. So I think that then overcomes people's automatic depression or sort of retraction from accepting of new technology. Actually, I heard James Cameron said the other day on an interview about what are his fears or his, fears about, the future of technology and where's it going. And bearing in mind, he was the creator and writer of the Terminator. So I find it quite interesting that he's also getting into investing in this new technology from a creative perspective. And he said it reminded him of when his father got dementia, and when his father started losing that cognitive ability, and this the real depression and this angst and anxiety. And I think that's where we are with society at the moment with technology. I think we need to sort of actively really bring people into this environment. And that is one of the main drivers of actually, firstly, creating the building in an existing community. It's not on a research campus, it's not in some big multinational quadrant or campus either. It's a building that's of the same scale of the buildings around it. It's part of the community. It's really to bring it as an education tool and let people interact and immerse themselves in it and realize, hey, this is a normal house. Could be any 5 apartments. There's nothing really out there that's really untouchable and uncomfortable about it. And I think that's where the discussion starts when it comes to technology as the future,
I
is
think that's
really
a
getting
very
people onto the
important point
page.
to make, and we see that we talked about it before. We see that obviously with our favorite Apple, how it's created by Steve Jobs. You always go with the user experience first. That means you really check what should be the experience be you want people to have, and then you check what the technology is, not the other way around. So the question here also of the beauty, I would say, that you offer is in the little valley in Switzerland, that you can come, that you can see it, and that you can experience it yourself. So you
Yes.
can touch and feel what you talk about. So it's not only research in the sense of paper research or virtual reality research, it's also part of the bigger picture. And I love to come beginning of next year. I'm already thinking I will spend a weekend there to
You're
really
most
explore
welcome.
it, have nice food with you and your wife, understand better what the technology is about, because it's always also about the nature you are in. And how do you connect with the nature aspect? Because from my point of view, and as we have seen in many, many studies, very, very important to integrate almost nature in smart cities, in living buildings, and in everything we do, because that is really what nurture us is
Correct.
nurturing us, and is nurturing our health.
Well, what I've touched on is a bit more what I call the meta part of the research. But we have 6 topics, and the first 3 that we sort of got actively operating sort of as the beginning of this year was energy, water, and materials. Now, the interesting thing around those 3 subjects is those are the 3 core building blocks of any building. Once you have those in place, you can then build on it, and the rest becomes a bit sort of plug and play. So we have multiple research projects in those 3 topics going, but really on looking back before actually going forward. And what I mean by that is material sciences. We're going to build this 4-story building using regenerative construction methodologies, using clay and earth from the site. We're not using any cement or reinforcing. We're using natural bio-based polymers to build a 4-story load-bearing structure out of earth material. This has been done before in many cultures around the world. It's just that we're adopting a new technology to where we are in the context of Switzerland and our cultural references, as well as the materials we have available to us. So you could say that, yes, it is sustainable, and yes, it's maybe, I don't know, more contextual to the area we're at, but it's also returning to ways of building that have been known for a very, very long
For
time.
centuries. I mean, if we think about
Indigenous knowledge
cave,
around building is
yeah.
centuries old, where scientific knowledge is only a couple of hundred. So we're trying to mix these 2 together. And that's a great example of using, the past and the present to actually create what the future is going to be when it comes to technologically going forward.
Yeah, so you almost you go back to our roots, or we go back to the roots
Correct.
and then integrate future technology
And
to
then connect with your surroundings by how you harness your energy source. We're doing a mass integration of photovoltaic panels, for example, where the translucent and opaque surfaces all generate energy. And then it's about the distribution and effective use of it. So we generate our own energy. The same with the water system. We obviously take from the aqueduct, but we're disconnecting theoretically, because legally you can't in Switzerland, to actually create a self-sufficient circular biological loop for the entire water system, both drinking and waste, within a food and nutrient cycle with regarding the land. So the whole idea is to look at things more in a systemic way, more in a circular way, rather than in a typical linear way, and really sort of develop these things on a very manageable scale. We think of it sort of as a small scale. I know we're talking about smart cities in the context of this talk, but sometimes it's also good to get down to the individual nodes to really understand the complexities and then sort of scale it up.
Absolutely. You can also take that building and make it bigger and connect it with others and create other buildings, and they don't have to be the same, but it's almost like human beings there. So different
Exactly.
buildings, different human beings. And how do you have one aspect which I really like is a community aspect, but how do you live in the living lab? Is that in that building where you are? Is that only working for the time being? Is that also living? How do you get that connection
Well,
of
what
community?
we've done is we've actually addressed the whole idea of what community space is in a real estate topic. I mean, here in Switzerland, real estate is, you either live in it or work in it. It's very rare that it's actually community orientated. So with long discussions actually with our town hall, we've made the entire ground floor community area. So it's actually off the real estate. It's not owned by anyone. It's owned by the community, not just the building, but the extended community in the village. It's open to their use. So the idea is that that's a place where you can come together, you could work, you can have a talk, you can have a meeting. And then the 3 stories above that obviously are private. The whole building is designed as an adaptive reuse use case. So you could have a single story apartment, you could have 2 apartments, and then in the high density scenario, if it happens, they could be subdivided into 3 short-term sort of apartments to incorporate more sort of people staying over. So it's very much a case of the building is designed with 100-year future to be as adaptable and flexible as possible. going forward,
And
because
for a
technology
100-year
will change.
future, that is pretty amazing. If we think what can happen in 100 years, we don't even have an
We don't
idea.
even know what's going to happen in 5, 10. So we've
Exactly.
really tried to give it.
We don't know what is happening tomorrow. Maybe we have another
Exactly.
news from another mind-blowing AI. That last week was from Claude taking over control over our computing,
Correct.
the agentic AI, gigantic agentic AI. There is no difference anymore.
Yeah.
On one time is always excitement, on the other hand is like, oh, okay, so what are you going to do if the computer is taken over by AI and it does everything for you? It also
Mm.
questions the whole purpose we have in life. How do we redefine ourselves? A lot of people are already scared. What do I do? Because it's
Yeah.
nice to chill out at the beach, but how do I make my money? So how do I really earn money? Do we need universal basic income?
Correct.
So all of these questions we have to answer. That's why, in my view, also communities are getting more important, and how we interact with each other. And
Correct.
top number one, our creative thinking, our curious mind is something which is super, super unique for the time being, at least. Yeah, we don't know.
I find that it's an interesting topic. If you go back to Socrates and Plato, they talk in Latin of the concept of ozio, or ozzare, if you say it in Italian, which actually means the state of doing nothing. And in modern terminology, it's actually, you would refer to a person that just being lazy or just sitting down and being a couch potato, but it's actually the concept of being at one with your thoughts.
Yeah,
And I think this
it's
is one of the most fascinating things going forward with technology. Is it's going so fast. It's going to come to a point where we're going to have time on our side to be at one with our thoughts. And are we ready?
we are not ready.
I
So
don't think so.
no, because you see also some people like Yuval Harari, they meditate 3 or 4 hours a day.
Yes.
So they are learning how to be with themselves and how to use this inner power.
Yeah.
Whilst I would say 99% of the people, and I'm not excluding myself, it's
Mm.
hard for us to stop. It's hard
Yes.
for us to slow down because we
Yeah.
are educated in a way that everything has to be fast, everything has to just grab the moment, and then this next one and next one, and stand still almost means for us, or we go backwards, which is not always the case, because sometimes if you take a break, stand still, and be with yourself,
Yeah.
it's very important. That's also why I think your kind of thinking and your kind of execution in terms of the living lab becomes even more important, because we need to redefine ourselves. So it's not just working, living, and we see with remote work even. I mean, now I work remotely from everywhere where I am. So you
Mhm.
are now in a hotel, so you work
Exactly.
from a
Calling you
hotel
from
room.
Brussels.
I'm in my living room because I gave up my office. I said I don't need an office, and in particular not external. I
Mhm.
want to be here where my life is so different. It's so different. Things have changed super fast.
Yeah. And I think
So
that it's being open to it, being receptive to it. And I think also just being open to critical thinking and realizing technology, yes, these technologies that are coming out, if we think of specifically AI, we don't know what the limits are. And I think that's the most scariest thing, is that we actually don't know where it will go and how it will go. But at the same time, realizing at this moment in time, it is a tool. You have to actually become one with it. And I think the most interesting book I've read on technology would be Scary Smart by Mo Gadat, who was ex-director of Google X. And you have to think it's like a child. Yeah, this tool will grow with you, and how you train it and what you give it will be the outcome of what it ultimately is. And
yeah,
that's
so
what we're
if
trying
the
to
child
do.
is well behaved or not depends on. Well, no, it's always humans who use technologies.
Correct. You're at
Sometimes
the humans are at the core of it. We've created
sometimes
it,
we
and we're
forget
going to be
it's
part of it.
us. We are the
Yes.
creator. Humans are the creator. But that is also some quote from Yuval Harari when he said, He's not scared about the technology. He is scared about the humans creating the
Yes.
technology.
Totally agree with him.
And I think that's a
100%.
very, very fair comment.
It
So
is.
a final word from you. I think we almost had an excellent conclusion, but a final word from you, the must do for people in 2 sentences in a world where everything is changing, and in particular in your field is going across everything. It's future tech, it's humanity, it's also buildings, it's our health. So what is the one thing you would say people must do now?
Must do now. I think on a personal level, I think you need to educate yourself every day. I invest time in learning what's going on, draw from the right sources, read, talk to people. And I think it's a 2 to 3 hour investment every day. That's my opinion.
I agree.
I do that. I do it naturally. It's just the way I am because I'm super curious and I love doing these things. The other thing I can say post pandemic and where we're going forward, touch on the subject future work, is your place, your home. Find it. It's important. Previously, it was just for some a place to sleep because you were going to work. That dynamic has totally changed. You have to find that comfortable place that's for you. You could be transient because you are doing various things, but that space and place where you can actually be yourself and actually be at one with your thoughts, I think is becoming critical. And I reference the point, it doesn't have to be built either. You know, a lot of people, I myself as one, I I know that I need to live close to the mountains and to the forests. It's a luxury I can afford and I make happen because of where I live. And I'm in it for a minimum hour and a half every day because that makes me connect.
Yeah, no,
And that's
totally
how I
agree.
would round
I
it up.
also I'm a nature person. I'm not so much a mountain person, despite the fact I'm living in the
No, you're more
so
beach and
I
sea and
prefer the
sun.
beach. There are not so many beaches in Switzerland, but at least you can connect with nature. And I think you have two aspects which are important. One is learn as much as you can every
Yeah,
day. So if you don't learn, then it's a real challenge. It was always a challenge, but even more so now. How
yeah.
you learn is, as you said, talk to people, get your network, look at platforms like LinkedIn. I learn a lot from LinkedIn. I'm top voice on LinkedIn. I'm trying to share a lot on
Mhm.
LinkedIn. I'm doing a lot of education for people, but I'm also educating myself.
Yeah,
So in the sense of it's a give and take, you can't give if you are not full. But to be full, you need energy, and that's the
yeah,
second part. Find your place.
yeah. And the
As
third one I would like just to add because you mentioned it and because you said LinkedIn. I love it. You know, I'm a child of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I remember when there wasn't internet and social media. Having these platforms now that you can actually reach out and ask someone, don't be afraid to ask because 9 times out of 10, someone will respond. And I
yeah,
think that's what's a lot. In the field I am also where I advise and educate and give less lectures to students. I keep stressing that. Don't be afraid to use the channels to ask a question if you're interested.
yeah, serious questions, and that's also I always respond if people come to me with.
I'm the same. If someone asks me a question, I think that is the way to stimulate critical thinking. And I think that is what society needs right now.